Globally, stock markets are under fire and have sank lower on China and the currency wars, which are red hot right now. The Euro viral contagion continues to rage on, and today we will discuss how the Greek Prime Minister has resigned. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's get into Greece today, the currency wars, China, and how the stock market is tumbling down. Let's begin with Greece. As we see Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras resigning on Thursday, hoping to strengthen his hold on power in snap elections after 7 months in office, in which he fought Greece's creditors for a better bailout deal but had to cave in. This information is out of Reuters. He submitted his resignation to the president and asked for the earliest possible election date. He's trying to pick up the pieces. He's trying to actually salvage what's left. Unfortunately, the people of Greece are hurting. We saw what happened when we had the capital controls, the bank runs, and people are panicking. They will panic whenever they can't get their money, whether it's the pensions or whether it's just money in their banks. They are going to get onto the streets. They're going to riot. The conditions that are occurring in Greece have only just begun. What we saw through 2011, 2012, and on to more recent times is simply just the beginning. Expect it to get much worse. Unemployment levels are incredibly high. We have all sorts of factors with the IMF and the EU dictating policy. You know that nothing will ever work out right. Let's get into the stock situation here. A global stock rout intensified Friday on fresh worries about the health of China's economy. Now, when I brought out this information to the public, certain people, a very select few, were not too happy about that. Why? Probably because they have a lot of money invested into it. Well, here's some more information for you then. Signs of a sharp slowdown in the world's second largest economy have unnerved investors since Beijing surprised the markets last week by devaluing its currency. Shares in the US, Asia, and Europe have tumbled along with commodity prices as investors worry about waning Chinese demand. China is one of the biggest consumers of many of the different commodities. If they stop purchasing or if they purchase less, obviously that's going to hurt other countries as well. We live in a globalized world and we need people to be buying up the commodities. If China's not doing it, then there really isn't that much of other countries basically going to be buying them all up. This is why you have a global rout. This is very important to note. Lots of good information out of this Wall Street Journal article, but I want to move on to this. Big stocks are a last hope for a decaying market. This is not the Money GPS. This is not David Quintieri. I am quoting Barron's. Now, how many times have you heard me, the fellow subscribers who are on here, how many times have you heard me talk about this particular situation? When you have a crash that is about to occur, you have only a few select stocks which continue to rise to push the whole thing up, but eventually that dies off. The whole stock market is not rising. In fact, on a whole, most of the stock market is declining. And then you have a few select stocks which have been able to support everything. I've showed you the stock about how Apple was the one who is bringing up the technology sector. And you can see this throughout, even go back to the financial crisis there. And what you will see is the exact same thing. I've talked about this before. I've predicted it. It doesn't take a genius. Just look at the pages of history and you can flip forward to the future. The NASDAQ is a, quote, dead man walking. Small caps are weak. More stocks are falling than are rising in the S&P 500. This is what happens here every single time, unless we have a major catastrophe, of course. But this is the normal process of the bear markets which occur, which, not necessarily like to use that word because it has different sort of connotations. What I would like to say is that a crash is occurring as we speak, but it is being supported by stock incentives that central banks are able to buy up the shares at a discounted price. We have share buybacks that are occurring with companies that actually have a lot of cash on hand, which isn't that many in many cases, and other reasons, the Federal Reserve being one. Let's move on to this Bloomberg Bloomberg article as we see the Federal Reserve. Look at this. What happens when the Federal Reserve loses its stranglehold over debt markets? Investors are finding out. Well, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet isn't in the quadrillions yet, so they have a lot of room to move, I assure you. The sell-off in corporate bonds is deepening, and investors are seeking safety in the longest dated government debt, which does best when the economy does worst. Defaults are rising as oil tumbles, and investors are looking for the best ways to hedge against credit losses. But what are they going to do? They're going to go into basically what they believe is more safe. But what is that? It's all paper. Everything is all paper, but the paper markets themselves are unsafe. If you put your money in the paper assets, whether that's in the banking system, whether it's in stocks, they're all interconnected. When you hold your money in something like real estate, for example, you don't necessarily need to care what it's at because you may be producing income from that property. Or perhaps you buy a cottage up north where you live, or in the cottage country, wherever that might be, or perhaps a beach house or what have you. If that's for your own enjoyment on the weekends or in the summertime or in the wintertime, whatever it might be, then it doesn't matter if the price is going down. You have that as an asset to you. It may not be a technical definition of an asset because it's not producing income, but it holds on to value for you. But it also provides you with something that you can use. But if you have, for example, government debt, what do you have? This is a diagram that I wrote or drew up in my book. And this is what you have when you have government debt. I'm actually going to do an entire video about this for the e-course, but I'll bring it to you here. I've showed it to you before. The government has a pile of debt, and you could see those little papers there, the IOUs, and then they package them up. Look at that little present there. Oh, it's so nice. It has the little bow on top and everything. I mean, it looks wonderful to me. It has a little IOU on the side of it too. And then they sell it as a bond. So what do you have? You have a bunch of pieces of paper that say IOU on it, and they promise to pay you back. Well, I guess I can trust them because they haven't done anything wrong before. They don't have any sort of deals going on the inside at all. So sure, I'll trust them. I'll buy their paper garbage. Okay, let's move on to this. The manufacturer of Oreo cookies recently announced plans to move production of Oreos from Chicago to Mexico, resulting in a loss of 600 U.S. jobs. This is what happens consistently. Whether they use Obamacare as the reason, whether it's just simply the regulations and the laws are too constrictive, and they can just move overseas, or they can move to Mexico, they can move to Brazil and China, what have you. How many factories now have been closing down all because of what's going on in the US? What can be done about this is that we need to make the incentives greater for people or for businesses, basically, to have their business within their own country. That's what's important, not to ship everything over to the third world, because it's not going to be good for business in the long term. You got to remember, if people don't have jobs here, what products are they going to buy? Let's move on to this. I love the Federal Reserve. They give me something to talk about every single day. The Dallas Fed seems to have gotten its guy in hiring Robert Stephen Kaplan, a former investment banker, to become its new president. Now, that sounds great. Sounds just like normal information, except for the next line where it says it's a Goldman Sachs veteran. Oh, once again, they have a Goldman Sachs representative at the Federal Reserve. Don't worry, because he can talk to his former veterans at the government structure, wherever they are in their positions. I've covered that before, showing you the charts. And this is what happens when you have a revolving door. I'm surprised actually that the Wall Street Journal actually used that word, revolving door. But here they are talking about how Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, all the big bankers basically have themselves in positions in the central banks, in the biz, in the different areas of the economic structure that exists. And they have this in place on purpose because they can put the rules and the laws in place which benefit and favor these corporations. It's very silly to think that Goldman Sachs needs your bailout money. It's not how it works. It's to take your money from the middle class and give it to the elite so that they can dominate you. Not necessarily the money. They have the printing press. They just want domination. And that's what's happening. Let's look at this here. Asian equities slid deeper into negative territory on Friday, joining a global sell-off sparked by jitters concerning the world's second largest economy. Their PMI is basically like their manufacturing index, marked a 6.5-year low. So when I say that, I'm just fear-mongering here. Don't worry, everyone. Everything is just fine, and China is growing at a million units per year. You know, like the ridiculous things that I hear all the time about these crazy statistics. Does the PMI even really matter that much? No, none of these statistics matter. What matters is how many people are actually buying things, how many people are actually employed right now, and these numbers are declining. Use any numbers you want. Use the millions and the billions and the trillions and all the other silliness that goes on that I have to read every single day, filter through all the garbage to get you a 10-minute video. But here it is with the PMI in China happening to be one factor, one indicator that is declining. There are so many. It's not just this. It's not just a 10-minute video here. These are hundreds, literally hundreds of indicators that I've been showing you that things are declining. People don't realize that until they're unemployed, until they're on the streets. That's the only time they're going to realize it. And what are they going to do? They're going to either riot in the streets, which I do not condone. They're going to riot in the streets, or they're going to go and they're going to beg and plead to their government. This is what happens every single time. And it's pretty silly when you could see it in advance. You start warning about it, and then particular individuals are just not getting it. And then this is just one piece of information I wanted to share. We, of course, know about Bilderberg, but here's the secretive beach retreat where China leaders plot world domination. And this is exactly like basically the Bilderberg of China. I thought this was pretty interesting. I'll just leave it for you to read if you'd like to. But basically they meet annually, and what they do is they, the same thing as Bilderberg. They decide what the rules will be in place. Now, we know specifically that whenever elite people are meeting in secret, we know that they're trying to use the darkness as cover. We know there's something else going on here. Very interesting to note. We also know that China, they have their own growing operations, so they don't have to have the food of the regular people. They have their own gardens and what have you, the greenhouses, just like the monarchy in the UK. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. And last but not least, if you found the video informative, I know you'll find my book, The Money GPS, even more informative. And you can actually flip through the book. If you go over to Amazon, they have this look inside feature, which allows you to flip through the pages of the book to see if you like it for yourself. Take care.